Absolutely. And speaking of the transit costs and the challenges of transporting food when you don't have a car and public transportation is expensive, there's other challenges that people living on social assistance face, uh, including the fact that for many of them, because of their living situation, they don't have like a fully equipped kitchen where you can get dried beans and prepare them from scratch. Like you might have a hot pot or a slow cooker and a kitchen sink, and that's all you have to prepare food.
Right, and possibly a microwave, but the weight of the welfare diet is about 125 pounds, so you simply can't shop it all in one go. I think for people who have access to transportation and might be living on modest income, their first reaction might be, well, I'll go out and I'll buy as much as I can of this in bulk. Well, if you don't have access to public transit. And even if you do, you cannot shop it all in one go. There's no buggy that can take 125 pounds of food. It simply doesn't exist. You can't get that and you certainly can't get that to a bus. So there's a lot of infrastructure that we presuppose that people might have, and again, they're not going to be able to shop it in one go, so they're going to have to pay more for the smaller amounts of the items contained in that in the diet. And then, of course, you would have to have appropriate storage facilities to be able to keep food. You have to be able to freeze it. You have to be able to refrigerate it. You have to be able to cook it. You clean it up, and of course you'd have to have the knowledge of exactly what you would do to cook a diet like that from scratch. But the people who often say, well, they can eat for a lot less are spending money elsewhere. They're spending money for gas, they're spending money for the insurance on their car, the maintenance costs, they're paying money for transit if they're taking transit. And certainly if they're shopping for bargains, as soon as you go from place to place to place, well, you're with the current cost of gasoline, you're burning through that at the same time. So you might save on the food itself, but you won't be saving overall. You're spending money elsewhere,
Right.
and that's often not properly taken into the equation. Whereas the OW recipient would not have access to those other amenities, let's say, or the infrastructure that would allow them to consume that diet more cheaply. So they would have to pay the fuller amount for it.
Right. Well, and another challenge. So I asked my friend who lives on ODSP for his advice, and he told me to buy more at the beginning when I would still have energy because when you're not eating a nutritious diet, you don't have a lot of energy and you don't have a lot of strength. And he said for his regular grocery shopping, the most he can carry is one bag. That's all he has strength for.
Yeah.
But um, another challenge is that many people living on social assistance actually live in food deserts. So not
Right.
only are they going on foot or by bike to get their food, but they have to go quite a distance because there's not actually a grocery store that's close to them.
Yeah, what I've certainly seen in Scarborough, where I am, and it's certainly true in other cities, especially in the suburban areas that often tend to have cheaper rents than downtowns of cities. What you find is over the years, the grocery stores, especially the ones where they actually bought the land, also created these gold mines called parking lots. And, and after a while, I've seen many, I could give you the addresses and the coordinates of where they were simply sold to condo developers. And it wasn't so much the store itself, which they took down, but was that large parking lot that became the gold mine and the impetus for that. But as soon as you so it was never planned like this back in the 50s and 60s when groceries were put in at a certain the grocers themselves actually would place stores certain amount of kilometers, have a certain amount of kilometers between them so that people could conveniently shop. But once we started to lose those to condo developments, especially in the cities, then that actually created the food desert. So it was an unintended consequence, really. Nobody planned to have long uh, stretches of roadway without any availability of groceries. It's just turned out when the markets for the land changed, that does not uh, tend to happen in downtown areas where you'll have lots of groceries. Grocers that are fairly near to each other. Why? Well, they never bought the land in the first place. They leased it because the land was too expensive
Right.
back in the day, and so that's why you tend to have more concentrated grocery areas in the downtowns of cities as opposed to in the suburbs and the exurbs.
Right. So in 1995, when Mike Harris made these dramatic cuts to social assistance, the argument was that this was going to get people off Ontario Works and back to work. And because that's almost 30 years ago now, we have evidence of what the outcomes actually were. So, what happened, John? Did people get off Ontario Works and go back to work?
Um, it's a very complicated story. Certainly with the social assistance reductions, and there was also a large raft of rule changes that took people off social assistance. The man in the house rule was brought back for lone parent mothers. There was a quit fired rule that if you're fired from your work, you wouldn't be eligible for assistance and that. So it's absolutely true that in the 1995 period through to the early into the new millennium, uh, I guess what we would call the caseload for Ontario Works, especially, did drop quite substantially. What we tended to see, three big trends in the new millennium is that there were more and more people with disabilities. And the reason that they were coming on a program like ODSP is because other programs like workers' comp and EI and others were tightening up, and private insurance programs also were doing veterans programs. Of course, were cut back, and there's really only one place for people to go when that happens, and that is to go onto the ODSP program. So that program rose quite substantially, but not because it was any easier to get on. It was just that the other programs that were supposed to take care of them were tightening up their own program. The other things that we saw was more and more singles, a very rapid and spectacular increase in single people coming on social assistance, people without disabilities, the singles, and that's basically, there was no other programs that were there for them. Although we did see a very large reduction. In 1995, the lone parent, what we would call the lone parent group on social assistance, was the single largest, and it's now almost one of the smallest. And the reason that those particular caseloads have gone down has an awful lot to do with the Canada Child Benefit, which is quite substantial, and which social assistance recipients are allowed to keep. So there's no clawback there was at one time, but
Hmm.
after 2008, there was no clawbacks of the Canada Child Benefit and the Ontario Child Benefit. So a mother with two kids gets 2/3 of her income through other income security programs like the Canada Child Benefit. And if she's able to get some work and maybe scare up some informal care through family and that sort of thing, and child support, after many goals at making it the enforcement of child support program, it actually is, the enforcement is much better after 20 years. I know people tend to think of it not being all that good a program, but it is enforcement of child support. And of course, mothers are now able to keep that amount of money if they get child support while they're on social assistance, which was a big change that happened over the last 10 years. So what we've seen, so all in all, we've had quite a growth in single people, people, single disabled people with disabilities, that's increasing, whereas the family configuration, people with kids, that's tended to moderate because of benefits being available through other programs.
Right.